The next lesson is creating a panorama. Photoshop makes it very easy to stitch images together for a panoramic scene. The book has you start this lesson from within Photoshop, but I always start my panoramas from within Bridge because I find it much easier. Right now I'm viewing the Chapter 5 lesson folder with Bridge in the Essentials workspace. We can see the completed panorama down here at the bottom. If I select that file, Skylined End, and switch to the film strip module, we can get a much better view of the completed panorama. The working files are inside of this folder, Files for Panorama. So I'm going to double click on that to open it. And we can see there's 4 files to create this panorama. I'll switch back to Essentials so we can see those better. Maybe if I make this a little bit bigger, we can kind of visualize how they're going to overlap each other to create the panoramic scene. Now, I recommend shooting these frames in the vertical format, not the horizontal. Anytime you want to capture a panorama, it's always better to capture them vertically with about 30 to 50% overlap in each image. When you shoot them horizontally like this, you end up with a super long, skinny film strip looking panorama. So shoot them vertically and it'll give you more vertical height in your completed image. We can get to the photo merge in Photoshop directly from Bridge. Start by selecting all of the images that you want to merge together. Go to Tools, Photoshop, Photo Merge. And that brings up the Photo Merge dialog that you see in the book. We'll select Perspective and then turn all of these on and then say OK. Photoshop will go through the process of opening each of these images into the same document and then aligning where they overlap, and it added masks to each of them and it automatically did all of that. It also created a merged layer on top and it filled in the gaps. I'm going to do a Command D to deselect here and we'll turn the visibility off of this layer to see what happened. So when these were all placed together, some of the sky was missing. And because we checked that last checkbox that did the content aware fill, it created the sky for us automatically. So it did a pretty nice job with this. At this point, there's no reason to keep these 4 working layers here. So you could toss those layers, or the book has you flatten the image. If you go under the panel option menu here, you'll see flatten image. And that merges all the layers together and essentially throws those 4 away. Next, we're going to brighten this image with a levels adjustment layer. I'll go to my adjustments panel, click on the levels icon, and let's stretch this out so that we can see the entire levels panel here. Nothing's happening with the image yet because we haven't moved the levels. If I turn the visibility on and off, we don't see a change. Levels is very similar to curves. This middle triangle is the mid values of your image. If you click on this triangle and move it to the left, it will brighten it, and if you move it to the right, it will darken it. Let's reset this back here and see what happens when we click on the Auto button. So the Auto button slightly brightened the midtone values. It darkened the dark values or the shadow values. That's what this left triangle is. And it brightened the whitest areas, which is this right triangle here. Let's undo this by clicking the icon here and picking the white point as the book has us do. That's this eyedropper. It essentially works just like curves does. If I select this and pick a white area of the image, it's going to brighten the whole thing, but it's going to work on those channels independently. So let's look at where each of these channels levels are now. I'm going to go to the red channel and we'll see that the white point of the red has moved this far over and the greens moved over even further and the blues even further than that. So it brightened the image and it balanced the color tones when it did that. For this last section of the panorama lesson, filling empty areas when cropping, the important thing is to make sure that you have the background layer selected before you go into this. In fact, I'll go to the crop tool here and then I'll pick straighten. And notice this option here for content aware is gray, and that's because I'm on the levels layer. If I select background, now I have the option to turn that on. So it's really important that you're on the pixel layer for this to work. And I'll take the straighten and draw a line right along where the horizon line of the water is. And that straightens the image so the horizon line's now level, but notice when I do this that there's some empty space in the corners. By having this option content aware selected, when I click check, Photoshop is going to use its content aware algorithms to fill those areas with pixels. It works great up here in the sky, but let's look down here in the corner and we'll see there's all kinds of problems down here. So you have to be careful what kind of information is in the corners of your images when you use this, and it's very likely you're going to need to come back with the clone stamp tool and clean that up. The next lesson is called Correcting Image Distortion. This will be most useful for those of you who are photographers, especially photographers with wide-angle lenses. We can see this image is kind of bent around the corners because it was photographed with a really wide-angle lens, and these columns are bowing in instead of being straight. So if you go to Filter, Lens Correction, I'm in the lens correction workspace now, and I'm going to go to the custom tab and take this barrel distortion out as is described in the book, and then say OK. Now the important part of this lesson that isn't mentioned in the book is that we did not convert this to a smart object first. So the change that we made to this actually changed the pixels, and we'd call that a destructive edit. We didn't make a copy of the layer first either, so we don't have the original. So I'm going to do Command Z to step back, and I'm going to first convert this to a smart object by going to the panel option menu, saying convert to smart object. And then I'm going to go back up to my filter, and we'll see the very last filter that I applied is always at the top of the list here. So I'll pick lens correction, and it's going to take me back into lens correction where I can change this again and then say OK. And now we'll see that that was applied as a smart filter, and if I toggle the visibility on and off, we can see a before and after.